appear that there's any kind of an effort up there yet. Now remember, oh my God.
Oh my God.
That looks like a second plane.
A tragic day. 2,996 people killed. The lead into Iraq. Over 1.1 million killed. 33,186 U.S. soldiers dead in Iraq. 1,900 U.S. soldiers dead in Afghanistan. The Patriot Act, a document that's led to the complete infringement of the American people's liberties for the false veil of security. This has led into the National Defense Authorization Act under Obama. So much war, destruction of our currency through the constant printing of money, Congress getting paid off, the president and his puppet strings, the NSA's spying, the words of President George H.W. Bush.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order.
Is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order.
The destabilization of countries like Libya, Syria, Egypt, and countless others, arming conveniently named drugged-up rebels that are actually Al-Qaeda, as senators pose alongside them. 9/11, no matter what you believe, was a day that changed everything. This is Josh Sigurdsson of Winnipeg Alternative Media. On March 19th, 2014, Richard Gage, co-founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, came to Winnipeg as part of his ReThink 9/11 Canada tour, stretching through 16 cities across Canada. He's a 26-year architect and has been one of the authorities on the structural impossibilities of the official story. He, along with 2,100 other architects and engineers, are demanding a new independent investigation of 9/11. He's made appearances in Loose Change 9/11, An American Coup, The Conspiracy Show with Richard Surrett, many appearances on The Alex Jones Show, as well as written and produced 3 hit documentaries, 9/11 Blueprint for Truth, Architects and Engineers Solving the Mystery of World Trade Center 7, which was narrated by Ed Asner, as well as 9/11 Explosive Evidence, Experts Speak Out. Mr. Gage was kind enough to talk to us before the show. When asked what had woken him up to 9/11 being an inside job, he told us this. What did you first read that woke you up to the idea of this being perhaps an inside job, or at least not done by terrorists overseas?
Well, we have 2,100 architects and engineers now signed on to our petition demanding a real investigation as to what happened on 9/11 with the 3 high-rise failures that we're talking about there. Most architects and engineers know nothing about the 3rd worst structural failure in modern history, World Trade Center 7. So what got me fired up is that, A, I didn't know about a 47-story skyscraper that on the afternoon of 9/11 fell at free fall acceleration straight down into its footprint in just under 7 seconds. Symmetrically, this is, of course, something we've seen in the old hotels, for instance, in Las Vegas, when they bring those towers down. So we knew that was a controlled demolition. The problem is that we were told that it was brought down by normal office fires. So we're talking about removing all 80 columns in this 40,000-ton steel frame structure. Yes. All at once on each of at least 8 given floors has to have been removed. So we've been lied to. Well, if we were lied to about the third worst structural failure in modern history on 9/11, what else are we lied to about?
Richard Gage has been working for years to inform the people in over 30 countries around the world of the impossibility of the official 9/11 Commission report. Like Larry Silverstein, who bought the lease for the World Trade Centers on July 24th, 2001, saying on television that he asked the firemen to pull the building.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
Which would be an impossibility, as Richard Gage explains. It would take a lot longer than an afternoon to plant bombs to create a controlled demolition. Now, if a building was to be pulled, can you explain to people how long it would take to plant bombs in a building to take it down in a controlled fashion?
Yeah, we're not talking about something that happens in the afternoon of 9/11. And he did appear on PBS TV in an announcement saying, well, maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it.
Yeah, that as well as a fireman as well, saying on video where it's going to be pulled, move away from the towers.
Well, yeah, Larry Silverstein came back and said, oh, I didn't mean pull the building, I meant pull the firemen out of the building. The firemen weren't in the building fighting that fire. So we have a very serious problem with Mr. Silverstein, who did, in fact, 6 weeks prior to 9/11, secure the rest of the buildings for a very good deal, putting only $125 million of his own money into the deal and pulling out $5.68 billion.
Wow. This revelation alone conflicts with the official story. Then there's the thermite and nanothermite in the dust and covering the scene at Ground Zero. There's thermite found at the scene on 9/11 in high quantities, as well as nanothermite in the dust. And what does this mean for the official story?
Well, they don't acknowledge, well, first of all, they say that they didn't find evidence of explosives at the World Trade Center. Later, they acknowledge in writing that they never looked for it, which is extraordinary, but thousands of other scientists, architects, engineers looked for it. It wasn't hard to find. In fact, it is, there are small chips of nanothermite, very sophisticated material found in all the World Trade Center dust samples that were independently collected by a small team of scientists led by Niels Harrit in Copenhagen. So these are extraordinary. This is clearly high-tech, military-grade nanothermite.
And let me just get this, make this clear to our viewers. Nanothermite cannot just be created, as he's mentioned many times, in some cave in the Middle East. It's something that's created under lab technology, and it's highly elite technology as well. So the idea of someone in a cage or a cave on the other side of the world producing nanothermite, it's pretty much unthinkable.
Thermite. An incendiary used by the military, thermite is a compound of iron oxide and aluminum, which when ignited sustains an extreme heat reaction, creating molten iron. In just 2 seconds, thermite can reach temperatures over 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit, quite enough to liquefy steel. We know that open-air fires cannot burn hot enough to melt steel, but metal had melted at the base of the towers. Appendix C of the FEMA report describes sulfur residues on the World Trade Center steel. The New York Times called this the deepest mystery of all. Sulfur slightly lowers the melting point of iron, and iron oxide and iron sulfide had formed on the surface of the structural steel. Sulfur used with thermite is called thermate, producing even faster results.
So we have sulfur that's added into the mix also, lowering the temperature. That's fascinating. Well, we're told by NIST, well, sulfur comes from the gypsum board. What? So calcium sulfate in gypsum board can't leach out somehow and attack the steel that the gypsum board is designed to protect. It never has before and can't physically do that. It's inert and it's bonded.
Richard Gage told us about Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth's massive billboards and advertising campaign. Well, I know that I've seen a lot of photographs of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. They've been advertising on billboards in New York City as well. as a few other places, I believe. And what has been the reaction to that? How has the public reacted to that? Because I'm just picturing that it's honest, it's truthful, but picturing a big billboard that says this, of course, is going to cause a lot of outrage among the people that just refuse to look at these situations and look at this whole story behind 9/11 truth.
Well, the media is trying to ignore it, first of all, and did a decent job. The mainstream media didn't pick up the 50-foot tall billboard that we had in Times Square, which millions of people saw.
Yeah.
So we created some attention, and we've got lots of people packed into our rally, if you will, on the street of San Francisco on September 11th. Right now, in Toronto, on the train station platform, where the trains are announced, we have Building 7 going down. And we say, did you know a third tower fell on 9/11? Rethink 9/11. The evidence might surprise you. So it's creating quite a controversy. We've been doing interviews constantly over the last couple of days since this started. So we'll be in Toronto on Friday night, and we're very excited about the level of disturbance we've created in the force field.
Well, I was very excited to see that as a truther myself. Now, you've been speaking about 9/11 for many years. What keeps you motivated to keep promoting this information all these years later? And I figure it has to get frustrating after a while when people just aren't listening and they just refute you, and no matter how much you talk to them, they just don't want to listen.
Well, there are people who do listen.
Yeah.
I anticipate that we'll have a lot of people here tonight that will come in believing the official conspiracy theory, because no matter how you look at 9/11, you either believe in the official conspiracy theory or you look at the evidence and you think something else happened. Yeah. We will convince almost all, usually there's one who just will not be convinced, of the evidence that we're going to be showing, that these towers were brought down by controlled demolition, which implies an inside job, as you mentioned.
Mr. Gage spoke at the historic Garrick Center in Winnipeg to a room of people eager to learn and be able to help out in the spread of information.
So this is an extraordinary structure for a lot of reasons. Some people said that the reason they were half occupied at the time of 9/11, for instance, is that they look like a jail cell, right? There's more steel in this facade than there is glass. So that's interesting in terms of a place you don't want to be, okay? But any collapse had to come down through all of that steel. So when it comes down at almost free fall acceleration, you have to use your intuition and say, wait a minute, how's it doing that coming down through all this steel in the core, that steel in the perimeter? It's a 100,000-ton heat sink also, meaning that any 1800 degree Fahrenheit fire, 900 Celsius, that heat would be wicked away from its source and distributed throughout the structure. That's the reason we don't have high-rise, one of the many reasons we don't have high-rise failures. The other reason is fireproofing. So the steel could never get to its failure point of 600 or so Celsius, where it loses half of its strength.
What you're seeing are high shots. Now, here we're going to show you a videotape of the collapse itself.
Describe that.
Now we go to videotape, the collapse of this building.
It's amazing.
Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
Well, Dan is using his intuition to describe what he's seeing. I mean, we have all seen those old hotels, which is great, but he didn't repeat that again after that day. In fact, we haven't seen Building 7 coming down on mainstream media with 3 exceptions, which is extraordinary given that it is, there's many high-rises that are built just like it. And if it came down due to normal office fires, which is the reason given 8 years later by NIST for its collapse, then we have problems throughout the world with many of our high-rises.
At the beginning of the night, when asked, there were quite a few people skeptical of the unofficial conspiracy theory.
But let's see where we are in the room before I present you the evidence, which is my job here, representing all these architects and engineers, over 2,000 of them. So I'd like to ask you 3 questions, and everybody falls into one of these camps, so you have to answer, so figure out where you are. Many of us believe the official story. This is what we've been told, no reason to believe otherwise. Jet planes hit the towers, large explosion of jet fuel, weakening of the structural system, and the top section of the building drove the rest of the building down to the ground in a gravitational collapse. Or you might be unsure, or maybe you came already agreeing with the evidence that we're going to be sharing tonight for controlled demolition. So how many of us pretty much believe the official story? No reason to believe otherwise. This is what we've been told. Come on, people, be honest with me. I'm being honest with you. Is there anybody? Anybody see any hands? Oh my God. You might be unsure, at least. How many of us are unsure of what brought the towers down? Go like this, I'll count you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And how many of you already agree with the evidence for controlled demolition? Wow. All the rest of you, why didn't you guys bring your friends? You don't have any friends. I know how you feel. It's a lonely world out there when you start opening your eyes. I've got some tools that will help you, hopefully, win your friends back. Or if not that, lose some more. We'll talk about that.
By the end of the night, there wasn't a single skeptic left in the room. At the end of the night, Richard Gage took questions from the audience.
So, who do you want to investigate?
Who do I want to investigate? Well, I think what I'd like to do is focus on getting an investigation. We don't have to have a target of our investigation to start one. And this is really important because you're going to have to answer this question too. You have a call, you're a detective, and somebody's been murdered. You approach the scene, there's a dead body on the ground, 3 shell casings. Do you have to know who did it before you start a fully resourced, science-based investigation to find out what happened? We got to find out what happened. We have some ideas, but we're just some architects and engineers loosely. We don't have the summons to bring people and force them. We can't take their testimony under oath. So we've got to get an investigation upon the recognition that a major crime has been committed and not the one that the Muslims throughout the world have been persecuted for. So I hope that helps. Now, having said that, there are some people, okay, who are responsible for perpetrating this crime. I don't know who they are. I am an architect. We are architects and engineers. Our job is to get the investigation based on the scientific analysis, information and evidence, and let the chips fall where they may in a real investigation. A grand jury investigation often focuses on who did it. So that's not my job. Now, some of you who've done some research have a list of suspects this long. That's cool. I'll support you. You go to court. With your targets, I'll bring the evidence, and maybe we'll get some justice. I have a feeling, though, that as soon as you start naming names, you're going to be handing to the media on a silver platter, and your enemies, whoever they might be, the ammunition to use against you, because they will say you have an agenda against that person or those people. So let's keep it clear, crisp, and avoid speculation, avoid giving people what they need to not even look or want to look at our evidence.
All right, Leah, thanks. Todd McDougall here from Winnipeg Alternative Media, and I want to once again thank you for coming here to speak to everybody. And thanks again for the interview that we got to do beforehand with you. And I don't think we had mentioned this in the interview, so I thought I would bring it more to the public forum here, because I don't think it was also touched on during the presentation. is any of your opinions, thoughts on the planes themselves? There's a lot of different story there. There's a lot of different ideas.
Which of the 4 planes are you referring to now?
The planes that, well, I guess more specifically the 2 that hit the trade centers, the towers.
Well, what would be one question about those planes?
I just know there's been a lot of speculation as to were they the actual flights that left LaGuardia or whatever airport I think they had left from, or...
Let's take that one first. Most of the 9/11 researchers don't believe that they're the same planes that left.
Right.
And most of them will not talk about that publicly because that raises a question, well, what happened to the people in those planes? Well, we don't know that.
Yeah.
But most of them believe these are highly outfitted, remotely controlled, guided planes, which technology existed then. So it's not a comforting subject to discuss because it offends easily the family members of the victims on those planes. And it's not a part, we don't have evidence for what happened there. There's a little bit of evidence that, well, there's no evidence that proves that the officials have shown to prove those planes were the actual planes. They won't show us the serial numbers or ones that they do have don't match, etc. There's major problems with those planes.
Sure.
But personally, by the way, I have talked to 6 people personally in my travels and 300 presentations who saw with their own eyes those planes hit those buildings. There are people out there that say there were no planes, that it's all fake. And I talked to 2 people that saw both planes hit the buildings, the Twin Towers. So I certainly don't believe that there were no planes. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Stu, and I guess I'm one of those guys who finally came I had my friend Bill brought me to this, and he's been after me for about 3 years. I'm one of those, you talk about the dripping thing.
Yeah, you got dripped on for 3 years.
He dripped.
I feel sorry for this guy.
He dripped
Let's
for
hear it
3
for Stu.
years, and I was like, oh, goddamn, Bill, you talking about this stuff again? Like, and it was usually done in a half-drunk murmur. He's like, oh, are you a truther yet? So finally, I figured I'd come out and listen to this, and I'm quite convinced by the science. But there's something that still troubles me, is that I cannot believe that in the 13 years since this event happened, that no mainstream media, not any mainstream media, has really picked up on that. And I just find that, I have a hard time believing that. I understand what you talked about, the bubble, the sphere, the family, the fear. I get all that, I understand that. I just can't believe that no one has picked up on this. And I need you to try and convince me as to why that is. Because I can't believe that Al Jazeera or NBC or any mainstream have not picked up on this.
Let's talk about those companies, those corporations, those major corporations, 6 of them that own 90% of the mainstream media. Just for a moment, try this on for size. If you did some research, like the Sonoma State-based Project Censored did, to find out who owns and runs those 6 corporations, who own almost all of the mainstream media, and I think it's a similar percentage in Canada, you find that they are owned and operated by the same people who own and operate the corporations in the arms industry, the oil industry, the banking industry, the insurance industry, and several others. They move lock, stock together, and they all benefited enormously financially from what happened following 9/11. So with that set of facts, and that's verifiable, that should help you to at least imagine why the media would be involved, at least the leadership of the media, who theoretically controls their reporters and anchor people. After the first day, you saw Dan Rather say, oh my God, dynamite to block. Not again after the first day, though. So I hope that helps, because what we're talking about is a policy in these media companies that says we do not report on conspiracy theories, right? That they label it that, and then they have a reason not to do it. And anybody who does it, and there's been many, by the way, they get fired. They, like Ben Swan, like Christina Jorgensen.
Amber Lyon.
Amber Lyon?
Yeah.
Who go and do their own thing after having been ground up in the system. There's a book in the Buzzsaw. So, anybody else want to add to that? Because I only have a smidgen of how many of you become your own media as a result of this gentleman's experience where the censorship of the mainstream media is not covering the story? How many of you actually have your own media? You have your blog, you have your
you're forced
video,
to find alternatives. You really
video
are.
blog. What?
You're actually forced to find alternatives.
Or create them yourself.
Yeah.
There's about 8 hands that went up in the room. Pretty extraordinary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard Gage has risked a lot and spent tireless hours working to study and then inform the public on what really happened on 9/11. There are so many unanswered questions. People are afraid to break their much revered paradigm of what happened on 9/11. Why wasn't the possibility of bombs even considered in the official 9/11 Commission report? Why was there molten steel and iron on the site? Why was there thermite on the site? Why did the news report on Building 7 falling before it even fell?
Presumably there were very few people in the Salomon building when it collapsed. I mean, there were, I suppose, fears of possible further collapses around the area.
That's what you would hope, because this whole downtown area behind me has been completely sealed off and evacuated, apart from the emergency workers. That was done by the mayor, Rudy Giuliani, much earlier today, because of, course, the dreadful collapse of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center.
Why were sounds of explosions heard by so many?
He came back over with his hand over the radio, and it sounded like a countdown. And at the last few seconds, he took his hand off, and you heard 3, 2, 1, and he was just saying, "Just run for your life, just run for your life." And then it was like another 2, 3 seconds, you heard explosions, like boom. There's like a distinct sound. It's not like when in compression, like boom, 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 like floors that were dropping and collapsing. This was boom, and like you felt a rumble in the ground, like almost like you wanted to grab onto something. That, to me, I knew that was an explosion. There was no doubt in my mind.
Why are people not listening to the vast amount of victim family members and first responders demanding a new investigation?
Saying that we have to stop the murder of innocent civilians. That's what war is all about now. Innocent civilians die. My son is an innocent civilian. He died. Why? Well, I used to talk about it was because of blowback. That was my first theory. People hate us. They did this because of blowback. Well, we all know the history of our foreign policy. It's horrendous. We are the actual terrorists. We've been terrorists for the last 100 years. Do what they did on 9/11 is crazy. It's changed the world, and the world's going to be changed for the next 100 years.
Why was a World Trade Center rubble quickly sent to China without any thorough forensic investigation? Is that not the destruction of evidence? Why were military jets told to stand down? How did 110 floors of steel and concrete structure collapse at free fall acceleration like dropping a brick from the sky? What's really the true conspiracy theory? The official story, or the evidence on Richard Gage's side, such as data from FEMA and NIST reports, testimony of first responders, whistleblowers, expert corroboration, foreknowledge of destruction and video evidence, as well as all the scientific and architectural evidence? Richard Gage's talk in Winnipeg was both eye-opening and informative, even to the most savvy 9/11 truther. And I have to say, we hung out for a while after the talk with a few other people, and he's a very kind, smart man. We hope to see him in Winnipeg again soon. A big thanks to Sparks Productions and Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. You can check them out at ae911truth.org. This is Josh Sigurdsson speaking from Winnipeg Alternative Media, and I'll let Richard take it away.
I'm Richard Gage with Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, signing out with Winnipeg Alternative Media.